Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance insights through in-depth discussion with experts. Season 3 of our show is your backstage pass to discovering how today's most successful sales and revenue ops teams support go-to-market strategy and improve sales performance. Plus, we'll explore what we can learn about incentives from different industries more broadly. Subscribe to hear how leaders are unlocking new growth, implementing the latest compensation trends, and their priorities for improving go-to-market performance. I'm your host, CEO of Forma.ai, Nabeil Alazzam. I'm very excited to kick off the show today. It's a little bit of a different take. We have a truly connected perspective, and we have both the RevOps and sales comp perspective from Boomi. Should make for a great conversation. And so, Tim, Taylor, thank you for joining. I truly appreciate having you on and being a part of this conversation.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I start with every episode with the main question of how the heck did we all get into this space? How did you guys end up in the world of sales ops and sales comp? And maybe I'll pass it back over to you, Tim, to kick us off.
Yeah, the illustrious road to sales operations as a career path. So I was very fortunate. I spent the early part of my career in the field as a direct seller and a sales manager, and I worked for a great company called ADP. It's well known for its sales development programs, and one thing that I think they do exceptionally well is that they've always treated operations as a rotational role. They pull people out of the field, gives a year or two of opportunity to see how the rest of the business runs, and then then provided a leapfrog opportunity to go back into the field at a higher level with a different set of skills, different background on how the business ran. And over the course of my career, I did that twice at ADP. And turns out that being an operator who has sold things in the past is a unique profile. That's afforded me opportunities to move into some great tech firms in the greater Boston area, which then gave me an opportunity to come in and stand up a team at Boomi shortly after we divested from Dell, and we were kind of starting from scratch. So it was an interesting road, but it's been a fun road.
I find like coming in from the on the ground, feeling the responsibility and accountability, it always helps. It gives you that level of empathy. It certainly provides a different perspective for what it means on the other side. I think, Taylor, I'm curious how you got into the world of sales comp. I'd love to hear your background.
So going through college, I wanted to do something that I knew would involve people and some sort of math and analytical side. I wasn't sure what that was, and so I got placed into luckily some internships at our local airport. So I got to check out a lot of different areas like procurement and risk management, HR, and I ended up landing in analytics for sales commissions or for the sales analytics at the concessions at the airport. So I really fell in love with doing analytics in that sense and kept pursuing kind of more analytic roles. And then I kind of, as I say, fell into one that happened to also do commissions that I didn't know was a career that existed. And I loved it because I was able to help people and also calculate a lot on the back end and spend a lot of time in Excel. And then it kind of took off from there. And I was able to go to a bunch of different companies and check out how they run their sales programs, learn a lot, get back into the management side to lead a team. And then I had got into the tech world with Dropbox and then had this awesome opportunity to come join Boomi and really help improve some of the operations here and lead the team. And it's been great ever since. And it really fills that people and math analytics side that I was really looking for.
The analytics and data and being kind of technical and close to data is so critical to the compensation side of it. It's not just a simple math problem. The data side of it is quite complex. And, at the end of the day, I think both ops and comp, it really is a thankless role most days. You have to block and tackle to get everything done in behind the scenes. And if it works great, it's silence, which is what we aim for, like just flawless execution background. But, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And, just to double click, as you guys both talked about, but whether it's building up a great sales acumen and background from, companies that do performance management of that very well to coming from a background of analytics and scaling and having a team to execute on this, team makeup is really important. So what day-to-day things are you guys doing to make sure that you have a high-performing team? And maybe, Taylor, I'll pass it over to you to kick us off.
When we think about what's going well, we can look at how it's going with the sales team, but then also our own teams. And so to your question, I think it's really important that we are making sure we have a high-performing team on the sales comp side too. And some of the ways that we really drive that are fast feedback. So making sure that as things are going, the world moves very quickly, our company moves very quickly. So giving fast feedback is something that is definitely I've learned here at Boomi. Tim's great at giving fast feedback, so you're not wondering, so you know what's going on and you could keep moving day to day. And I think that goes well instead of waiting for a one-on-one or, an annual performance review. Really makes it clear for your team. I also think over communication, making sure that you know what the plans are, if there's any plan changes, any exceptions, making sure everyone knows even twice to make sure it's really settled in there. On my team specifically, and I know within Tim's team too, we really focus on the culture of helping each other. So the way that I always say this to my team is if you're constantly trying to help other people, they're also constantly trying to help you. And you really want that group effort to jump in, help each other, and make that day to day really manageable. And then really instilling just the confidence in the team to know that you trust them, that they are good at their jobs, that they know how to do it very well, and trusting them to really move forward there. Those are the main key principles that we think about, or at least I think about during the day.
She does an excellent job at it too. She's built extraordinary teams. I agree with everything that Taylor said. I did read a book many years ago called Radical Candor that I think gave me an opportunity all of a sudden to double down on some of the approaches that I had taken, and I think it's really paid out. The first premise is it starts with the people. So if you want a high-performing team, you have to hire people who want to be high-performing people and who want to become managers of their own high-performing teams. And it takes a minute to start to pull that stuff out during interview processes and whatnot, but it starts with getting the right people in place. The other premise of this book is that you're willing to make work personal because we spend so much time together. We spend so much time doing it. Making it personal on the personal front enables you to have a really empathetic approach to the human aspect. But at the same time, when you've built that relationship and you have that human empathy, you're also able to, and you have the license to challenge very specifically the outcomes or the process or the work balance that you're trying to accomplish with the team. And it creates a really nice dynamic when you have the right people and you've genuinely addressed the people connection. That last piece, it becomes collaborative and it becomes constructive, whereas, out of the blue, it can feel confronting. But I think that's how you get the flywheel going. And when you realize you've got the magic, when your team starts doing it amongst themselves, right? And they start doing it together instead of, in the direct manager to employee relationship. So that's been the fun part. And Taylor's been a major contributor to that within the team too.
Especially in the space of, again, ops and comp, like you truly have to have a team that is accountable. And that accountability comes with this like ownership, that making it personal, like you are impacting people's livelihoods and their ability to be successful in the roles that they're in. And I think it is a thankless role, but in some ways, it's a thankless role that needs people that really step up to the plate to execute. It's hard to do.
For sure. It's thankless, but it's rewarding
Yes.
because, what I found when I dipped my toe into operations the first time was, wait a second, I left covering a sales territory for New England where I was successful and I felt good and and all of that. But I immediately opened my aperture to North America and then it opened to global. And I was able to start working on things that were impacting 1,000 sellers. So you can be one good seller, and then as a manager, you can influence 8 good sellers and follow the pyramid. But what operations has allowed me to do is have both a broader impact on a huge volume of sellers, but as operations has grown and we've adopted revenue operations, it goes upstream into into demand generation, downstream into PSO and success. Like it allows you to have a far bigger attachment and view into the business than I was ever able to have in the field as I was kind of looking out. And so that's been the fun part of it for me, which makes up for the fact that nobody throws parades for operational jobs well done.
Yep, that is true. And I feel like all rivers flow into comp because all the decisions that you make and kind of like the territory role definition, all the data decisions end up kind of being a feeder in. But the other side of that equation is that you get to be and ingest, or like you get to digest all this information that gives you really a really good purview for how the business operates, what's important, what's critical. And so
I also think, just to add on to that too, that while it is a very thankless job and it's not always highly recognized, it's also our jobs as leaders to recognize our team and make sure that they have the visibility of what they're doing, and that while we also impact the livelihood of all the sales team, this is also their livelihood of their what their job is, what their career is, and how they get recognized and how we help develop our own team to grow is really important too. And I think that what makes a difference for any comp admin, because as I think in the industry, it's not the most tenured field because it can be stressful and thankless. It's who you report to and who you focus in. And I think like Tim does a great job in recognizing our team because he's been there and worked with comp analysts, so he gets it. So having a team that gets it and understands what the day-to-day stress is huge and can really help your team be more successful and happy, which then translate into help support the field of helping them be happy and successful too. So I think it's really important as a leader to make sure we keep in mind that on our teams as well.
I'm curious, what do you think is often overlooked by people managing and running ops and comp teams?
It's very easy to get caught up in the monthly cycle. And then before you know it, you're in year-end planning. And then before you know it, you're launching those. And then you're taking a deep breath and it starts all over again. So I think really building in the time and having a very well-built team that can support the whole organization and have time for learning and growth and stretch projects is really important. So you want to make sure you have that all built out to have that focus and know that they're growing their career too. And it's so easy to get caught up in that monthly cycle and have years pass even sometimes of, wow, we're just getting through this. So I think it's that conscious time and effort and taking that step back and building that bandwidth for your team that goes a long way.
The seasonality of the different type of work required from a comp or ops team is insane because you like there's some work that's just blocking and tackling. You just have to get it done. And I've seen this far too much. I don't know, like again, from your perspective, it's like the turnover or the average tenure of a comp or ops analyst is actually very low. Like they almost always, there's a lot of people jump from that to a different career or different path. And I find a lot of it's because you don't, it's hard to manage and kind of have like the creative work versus the, proactive versus the blocking and tackling that needs to get done. And if you don't kind of bake time for those buckets, you end up kind of burning out team members very quickly.
Which is totally possible, but it creates an enormous problem for a company because without divulging anything, like I believe our variable compensation budget, so people on comp plans, it makes up, well, I'm not going to give a percentage, but it's probably a top three OpEx line item in our P&L. And if you look at the number of people, it's about 45 to 50% of the people who work for Boomi are impacted by the work of that team. And then from having sold payroll for a long time, you learn very quickly like compensation is personal. And when personal things go wrong, they get emotional and you get like really fiery situations, right? So like, how do you underinvest in the team that's managing a major cost center that impacts half the company that is just emotionally charged? Like, I think too often we say like, oh, well, that's a place where we should find scale, efficiency, automation, whatever. But what Taylor's team does really well is they make it personal. They have that empathetic approach. They get on the phone and they talk to people. But they can only do that because Boomi's invested in the capacity to allow them the time to get on the phone, to talk to the people, to diffuse the situation and blah, blah, blah. So this isn't an area to overlook in ops work. You gotta be really careful.
100%. Yeah, the danger is seeing it as truly like just the cost center when it's actually like this is very common, by the way, almost across the board. Fortune 500, it's like it's a top two, three cost center, and it makes sense. I mean, the U.S. alone spends $1 trillion on variable compensation for sales professionals. So it's like this is a massive part of the economy that is being spent in this, and I think if you don't see it as like an area to optimize the investment versus as just and seeing it just as a cost center, you set yourself up for a lot of pain. Because yeah, I really love the connection of like personal becomes emotional, which is very difficult to have a conversation and rational discussion when anything is emotional, right?
Yeah, we can't overlook that. I think a lot of times people just want to be heard. And so even if the answer is not the one they want, if they feel heard and connected and that there's someone to talk to, that goes a long way. And that's something we've just learned over time to make sure they have resources to do that because it's emotional and we can't pretend like it's not.
And being there, sometimes it's a data thing, sometimes it's someone just needs to understand and have that translated to them, like in the way that they need to understand it and how far that goes. It's really impactful. I mean, I remember kind of being hands-on and kind of running comp myself back in the day. And when you got those thank yous and the appreciation from the field, it did feel very, very good because you felt it wasn't just a gratefulness for work, it was a gratitude of like a personal thing, right? And this is where comp is a bit more difficult because it is tied to everything that you do across the entire operations spectrum. To double click on one thing that you mentioned in terms of like the workload and not going month to month, how do you deal with those very fast requests? Those kind of like, oh, we need to make a change to a comp plan right now, or we need to make this adjustment, or we just have an upstream system change that requires kind of like, all of a sudden everything is required to happen in that moment for something as extreme as like, when COVID lockdowns occurred to, as simple as it's impacting one small geo or one small group. How do you think about reshifting and prioritizing the organization when you do have these urgent events happen? Maybe Tim, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, I think as close as we can keep recognition and compensation tied together, meaning on a time frame, because recognition is immediate and comp usually lags. As close as we can keep those tied together, we create a cohesive message that what you did deserves both recognition and some amount of compensation as a result. So I think speed is of the essence. When you have a strong team, and especially when you communicate well in advance, I'm in favor of speed when you don't let perfection get in the way of progress. So we rolled out a program entering our third quarter last year. I had thought, well, it's going to take some time to build. We should kick it to the end of the quarter. We'll accumulate earnings and pay out once. And Taylor said, no, we got to go now, and we can be ready to go now if you want to go. And so we communicated early that we were going to go fast. We said, listen, there's going to be some mistakes. We're going to host some office hours. We're going to do some reconciliation reports. Everything will get picked up in the next cycle, et cetera. It created first an element of calm in the field that it was thought of and covered. Then it created the excitement. Then it was massively successful and we got the results. And arguably one of the quietest programs we've run is one that went out probably 2 months faster than I would have said it should, but it worked great. And it was because of a committed team and good communication and an understanding stakeholder base. And we got it done.
Yeah, I think to add on to that too, one huge part from the comp team side is that you have the RevOps leader and someone come in and check with you first that it works, right? Because I've been in situations where they say, we're doing this, and that led to that downstream kind of issue that didn't quite work. But I think what Tim is great about is that over communication we talked about at the beginning of we're thinking about this, would this even be possible? And what's a realistic timeline so we could set expectations? Because setting those expectations is always key of making sure we aren't over promising and under delivering. And one thing I always like to think about that too is making sure that you have the tools in place so that your commission process and admin process and tool isn't dictating what the company wants to do and incentivizing their sellers. So it's really making sure that you are prepared for those fast changes and frankly accepting that they're going to come, right? We can pretend that a whole year will run smoothly, but it doesn't always work that way. So how can you mentally prepare for fast changes that are coming, but also make sure your processes and tools are ready to handle those? But I think it goes a huge way just to have that communication of even what Tim will do for us sometimes is this might be coming. What do you think? What are the operational sides of this? What would happen? And I'll say, hey, if the goal is this option one is better than option two, but we can do that fast. And I think that allows for that ball to go get rolling faster and smoother as we go out and actually process that change.
Yeah, no, the communication, there's so much dependency on the metric that you want to track. If you can't actually capture that in a way you can compensate accurate to the penny, then that's a problem. And I think having that connectivity is critical. And so this goes back to the value of having both perspectives on here is actually great because it truly is like one you're dealing with on the ops side all the way up to like the data at the very tip of the funnel as it goes through, and having the connectivity to being able to tie it out and exit and ensure you can execute. By the way, I also love the move fast and iterate. I feel like a lot of compensation is and sales incentives is really limited by the thinking of, okay, we need to operate within this like cycle. And if you think about the best loyalty programs in the world, the best incentives in the world, they're far more dynamic. And as long as you treat people fairly, you can make something more dynamic. People just don't like their cheese being moved and the livelihood being moved without that respect and the treatment. But these two things are not opposite of each other. You can move quickly, you can roll out incentives. I love the empathetic approach of like, hey, we're just doing this, we're trying this. It may be wrong, but we're going to get it right. And this is how what we're like. That is so key to making a successful program work where you are able to move at that speed. That's awesome. Maybe to kind of double click on this, because I think in the world of sales comp or revenue operations broadly, there's so many kind of like set structures that are like playbooks that are deployed. And I'm curious if there's any like hot takes that you have in the world, kind of like the contrarian view on what would work in whether, across sales performance, sales comp, or RevOps.
So I kind of broached this a little bit earlier, but if I was going to come up with any one controversial concept for ops, I would say your next ops leader should come from the field and preferably within your company. I think what it afforded me from a career perspective is the motivation for that person to make the change. But when you bring someone in with field relevance, that's a word we use a lot, field relevance, who can come in and understand what's top of mind for the seller within your organization, what's worked, what's not worked, have that network of peers who can create a feedback loop. It's how you will start to get dynamic programs that are more rapidly adopted. Operations can kick out programs all day long, but activity trumps content all day. And so it is a way to ensure that you're putting the people who need to consume and execute a program at the forefront of how that program gets built. And I think it also just creates a really dynamic relationship between the field organization and your operations organization, which is only positive. That can only lead to better things. So there aren't many people out there who have done it, and you're going to have to give them the opportunity to also hire around some of their weaknesses. There aren't a lot of salespeople out there who have great Excel skills. If you find one, make this move fast, but allow them to fill in around their weak spots so that they can bring the best of what they know from the field into the team and use that as a way to challenge the team directly on not only how do we operate the most efficiently, but the most effectively and get the best outcomes as a result of all the work that the ops team is putting in.
Yeah, I'd say just on top of that too, you also get their perspective of what is working just on the day-to-day emotional side. We kind of talked about emotions here in the field too, of what's frustrating them at the current processes, what's working, what's not working, what could be better to get that real time. This was my day-to-day. This is what I'm experiencing. And then you could really help be there for the field and make sure they have what they need moving forward if you get the perspective of someone who was just there.
I mean, I think that domain experience and then the empathy, it goes a long way. It is very difficult to find the technical skill set and uncover it from someone in the field. So I'm curious if like, do you find does it sit sometimes more on kind of like the sales engineering side or on the more technical sellers? Like, is that a good area to think about it?
I want the really creative thinker who loves solving problems for customers, because ultimately, if we up level operations to the highest level, all that we do is solve problems all day. And sometimes we solve problems that are brought to us, and sometimes we identify problems that we identify and want to solve proactively. So anyone in a customer facing role who does discovery with a customer, here's their problems, here's potential use cases, and then packages their product or their offering as a solution to that problem, like that's the core skill set from an operations perspective. Then Excel skills, proclivity for data, but these days, even within the past 2 months, we can all become world champion analysts based on asking good prompt questions versus building macros in Excel. So I think that technical gap is going to get shrunk pretty dramatically over time. And it will be the creative problem solvers that are the ones that would be interested in making that leap and who you want asking the prompt questions.
Yeah. The domain experience and kind of the passion become the primary differentiators for success. And I mean, you can always, and I think what's interesting is, there are going to be people that are just great at architecture and they're just kind of those profiles. And that's not
Sure.
necessarily like that can still be a profile you hire for in your RevOps org, but someone who's going to bring the business lens and kind of like the voice of the customer, which is the sales org, I think is
Yeah.
tremendously powerful. I agree. It's far too scarce for most RevOps orgs. I'm curious, Taylor, on the sales comp side, do you have any hot takes?
Given the size of the budget that tends to go towards compensation plans, we put a lot of how can we pay our sellers more? But I actually think there's an element in there where you could potentially pay your sellers a little bit less and use that budget to make sure that they have a fully supported team. So, kind of back to that theme of having enough people to support the field. If you can eliminate their frustrations with booking deals, eliminate their confusion around how their plan works, have someone that's available for a quick question so they're not following up on cases or Slack messages or emails, that's all time spent that they could be selling. So if you can really use part of that budget to make sure they are fully supported, and that could even just be hiring someone to be the question answerer every day that's available and have it available for them in their time zone. I think that can go so far into eliminating the frustration of day-to-day work, making things run smoother, making them feel comfortable and supported to focus on their jobs, right? Like their job is to go sell. The more successful our salespeople are, the more successful we all are. So we say this to my team. That's one of our fundamentals on my team is we are trying to reduce the operational side for the seller on the comp understanding and processing piece so they can go sell more. And so I really think that, potentially one less accelerator point on their comp plan that goes into alleviating those day-to-day frustrations would make for a more productive, a happier seller that then helps drive more revenue for the company.
You want to maximize the earnings for top performers. And the definition of what good performance, is really tied to like behavior. It's like, okay, are you actioning on this behavior that we want from you or not? And I think you're right. Like there's a lot of studies that show the selling behaviors are only really making up less than 30-40% of the actual time of a seller. And then there's so much time gets bogged down in the blocking and tackling. And the more you can unlock that, you can really expect more from upside and you can potentially like pay a little bit less. I guess how do you think about the connectivity of the sales comp budget to like headcount budgeting? And this is obviously a conversation that spans both comp and broader ops decisions, but it's an important one because I imagine for certain selling roles, you're kind of the comp is being dictated by the market requirements less, by what you'd want to pay. When you think about making that optimization decision of, okay, we're gonna, reduce the pay curve or we're gonna shift the pay curve to fund another role, that's a pretty like broader company decision because you're affecting the role design and architecture and the pay curves and the comp side of things is typically an HR or market driven requirement, right? Like if your competitors are paying very aggressive pay curves and you want to keep up, it's a little bit dictated by market requirements. So I guess like how do you think about approaching those decisions? Because I agree with you. There's opportunity to optimize the pay curves so that you're actually running the selling organization better. It's better for the business, it's better for sales reps if they spend 50 or 60% of their time selling versus the 30 or 40 that's the average, right?
Yeah, Tim might have a different take on this, but I guess the way that I would think about it is if you are able to, even in the short term, reduce those pay curves, get a well-oiled machine that's running effectively, is a happy sales comp team that then can shift their thinking to my life every month is just the same thing over and over, to having some gaps to then analyze your comp plans more effectively, look at what's working, how are sellers behaving, what is actually producing the most revenue to the company, and you start looking at that and tailoring your plans to align to those, the company's now making more money, which then might increase your commission budget, right? So if you can get into those cycles, and again, I'm talking kind of more pie in the sky
Yeah.
a bit
Yeah.
with this and looking long term. But if you can start saying, hey, we actually now have room because we have time and effort to analyze those plans and push the behavior the way we want it to go, then you're bringing in that revenue, right? And I think I am very lucky to have an excellent team here at Boomi who is very, very skilled. And I would love to use those skills to also look at what we're doing, make better reporting, push forward with that actual path to see what we're doing and how it's impacting the entire company, and then go backwards and look into what that means then for our commission budget and have sellers who are excited. I also think it's important not to decelerate your plans. So even if they might not make the same percentage all the way at that top, they're still making a lot of money. So your top performers can keep on going. But I'd be interested to see Tim's take on that too.
In case there are any Boomi sellers out there listening to this, we did not rob the piggy bank to let Taylor hire another person. I
100%.
think conceptually it makes total sense as we said, like with such a cost center and such an influence to underfund the support of it would be a big mistake. So I use more of the FUD approach to get that staffing in place, when we look at the total line item on the budget. But one thing that we do very differently is we know what the available OTEs of all of our sellers and comp eligible people are. That is not exactly what our budget is for variable compensation, right? Those two things are different. And
Yeah.
in fact, at Boomi, they're about 15% different because we leverage both an assumed attainment rate, which is not usually 100% on average. We use an assumed attainment rate plus that overage as a means to motivate the right behaviors and incentivize, whether it be specific products or specific behaviors or specific outcomes that we want to recognize people for. So it's within that kind of grand budget, not the sum of the individual's OTEs, that we have some flexibility to make sure that we can run the right programs, have the right staffing, et cetera. And that's the same trade-off you make anytime you're making investments. If we invest here, we get this. If we invest here, we get this, which has the better rate of return. And you go in that direction. And the investments we've made in Taylor's team have paid out.
Like this is the kind of questioning and the thought process you want to go through in terms of what is the best thing for the business outcome. And there's so many levers at play when you think about like everything from segmentation to role design to territory quota setting to comp. Like you move the one lever here, it's going to drive an outcome. You move another lever here, and I think having this holistic view is actually a very healthy thing because if you get too focused on, okay, this is our comp budget, how do I engineer the outcomes for just this one thing? You neglect the overarching like picture that needs to be painted when you factor all these things together. So I think it's a healthy take, which again, it's easy to not do because all of us are tasked day to day with like, okay, get this part done. And so I do think that stepping back and thinking about it holistically is very powerful.
Absolutely. It's definitely refreshing to have that full team here so we can pay this team more. To Tim's point, my hot takes are based on just decade in the industry of looking at what the typical patterns are with comp admin. And so it's been nice to work at Boomi where it is invested in and we don't have to limit the sales field to make sure that we have them supported. So it's been great.
It's an interesting concept to think about, but really incentives are not driving like it's driving the impactable portion of revenue. If there's no sellers tomorrow for at Boomi or any company, the odds that there's going to be zero revenue sold is low because there's some continual like just momentum of the brand and the business that kind of carry on effect. And so really your incentives are about impacting a specific set of behaviors and only part of the revenue is actually being driven that year based off the incentive structures you put in place. And so that again, stepping back, thinking holistically of like, hey, what are the sellers doing and how do we get them to do more of this behavior and less of this actually could result in a better outcome for everyone. So to your point, Taylor, it's like a win-win. The reps make more because they're higher attaining. The business makes more because more people attain. Where you get the best low-hanging fruit from the investment is really kind of a very holistic view.
Yeah, and I think too, we focus a lot on incentivizing our sellers, but we have to not lose the fact, and I'm sounding a bit of a broken record about how I manage my team, but what incentivize our team to make sure that everything is accurate and they're staying up late at night to make sure the data deadlines are hit? What's incentivizing our groups too, even not just sales comp, but throughout RevOps to make sure that we are supporting each other to get to these end results? Because we can't forget that piece of it too, right? Like there are many late nights in sales comp across every company I've been at. So what is really driving our team to make sure that we're there and happy and healthy and supporting the field the way that they need to, which then cascades, out and up? Because to your point, everything flows through us. We're the very last point. So how do we make sure we are incentivizing the whole group to work together and really hit what we need to hit at the end of the day?
So on the opposite side of hot take, what myths do you see in RevOps or sales comp? I mean, again, pass it over to you, Tim. On the RevOps side, like what myths do you see that are very common but completely should be debunked?
So relevant to comp for sure. I hear two regularly. Like the first one is that comp plans are designed to not pay out, and that the company actually doesn't want to pay commission, right? And then there's in the other half of this myth, which is the comp plan should be designed to pay out like a broken slot machine and just keep paying, right? And the reality is we spend an enormous amount of time in the middle, which is we do want to write those big checks. And my CFO and CEO, there's nothing they love more than bragging about how many million-dollar earners the sales team had each year and that kind of thing. But we're a for-profit business, and every role in a go-to-market is an investment. And there's a certain amount of return that's expected for that investment. And in return for that, then, we pay. And so we spend so much time worrying about how do we optimize this to allow people to earn as much as they possibly can by helping the company to hit their goals.
Yeah.
I would just want sellers to realize like neither end of that spectrum is right. Our goal is to pay out, but we need very specific things on specific timelines with specific initiatives to deliver on certain company goals, etc. So like doing it and hitting the aspects that are in the plan is how you optimize a plan, and a plan is designed to be optimized. So we want to pay, we want to write the big checks, but it's not by accident what metrics are in that plan. And so go out and get those, find ways to optimize those, and that's your path.
Absolutely. I think Tim also does a great job of over communicating that to the field, where he will even say, here's what you can do to earn the most on your plan. So it's not this puzzle we're handing them in the comp plan. It's like use this, leverage this, and you'll get paid on the high end. And I think too, from our side, just to add on to what Tim said, there's so many people that we hear of, hey, Taylor's team gets a bonus if they meet their comp budget, or, I've heard that multiple times. And also, is your team just a bot that's an AI bot that it goes into nowhere, right? It's like kind of what's happening here. And I think that what's funny to me is that to Tim's point, we want to pay out big checks. If I'm paying the sales field a lot of money, then it makes our jobs easier too. Like it's a benefit to all, as we've kind of talked about in this conversation. So.
A big commission check, it means a big deal or big outcome for the business. And so, I mean, like, this is where it's funny that this myth is still like, it is prevalent, and you see it all the time in sellers. Anytime there's a comp plan change, oh, they're doing this because they want to save money. And it's like, actually, almost always the comp budget as a percentage of total cost, like the total cost of sales has not changed as a percentage of the revenue expectations of the outcome. But it is and this was said, well by a guest that we had previous on the show, Gavin Tapper, and one of their sales leaders, described it as like it's a mosaic, right? Like if you take a part of this picture out, then it doesn't work. So it's like if you're gonna, if you really want that accelerator, then we have to have it like we have to take the money from somewhere else. And it's like, well, now you're gonna get paid less if you are less than 50% attained, right? Like there has to be a give and take. And I think that people see it as to your point, like it's a tree full of money and there's just more to grab, when in reality it's no, there is a lump sum. The organization is more than happy to pay the really big checks, especially if the whole business is overperforming, right? Like obviously, then yes, there's it's not a never-ending funnel of money, but obviously there's a, more money in the pool if the business significantly overperforms, but it's within the constraints of the ROI framework of how it was designed. And getting sellers to see that and kind of bringing them on a journey to help them account plan is, I think, is very powerful. So yeah, Taylor, what you mentioned, and Tim, kind of like that communication at the beginning of the year, like this is what you need to do. I think doing that is a very good thing, and this probably comes from the background of like being empathetic to the field.
Well, and back
Yeah.
to Tim's point about being in it too, right, Tim? Of like having been there before, of being a seller and knowing what they're looking for.
Yep, having been there before absolutely helps. Having been there before also gives you an acute BS meter, right? Where it's like, yeah, I heard that one before. I even tried that one before. Like, like that doesn't fly. So I think the general rule and going back to communication, sometimes you just have to say it, right? Just tell people our goal is to pay you as much as we possibly can, as long as you do one of these three things or two things or one thing, whatever it is, right? Having that kind of mentality is an important start. And too often, it's easy to sit back and try to find reasons to say no, because every once in a while plans break. You pay out more than you planned for the return you got as a business in the quarter, despite all the models you do, right? In the Monte Carlo scenarios. Like I'm accountable to that too. So you have to have a bit of a fiscally responsible mind, but at the same time, like it's also it's a contract between a person who's an investment and the company, and you do what we ask you to do, we're good to pay it.
I was gonna say too, I think that communication piece is key where sometimes a fast no will go a long way versus a long maybe or a long drawn out question that they have to follow up on. But if you can give them the quick answers, whether it's yes or no, then they can then redirect their attention back onto selling and moving forward. So that is key, I find. And it's been really helpful here at Boomi to have those fast answers.
Remove that distraction, get them back to the right behavior. I think we covered a lot. All of this information has come from like career experiences, to your point, whether it's, having seen the different disputes across different customers and different organizations. I'm curious if there's any real life experiences within the career of both comp and ops that have really changed your perspective on incentive planning and the leadership of the organization.
The one thing that really grinds my gears is when people say things like comp drives behavior, right? And salespeople are all coin operated, and all you have to do is put in the comp plan and it will all take care of itself. I believe that's like totally untrue. From my own time selling to leading teams to then building comp plans and building company plans, I find recognition trumps comp like 9 times out of 10. And all the white papers will say that, the surveys will say that. And if nobody believes that, then look at end of year behavior for people trying to make President's Club.
President's Club. Yeah.
Like bar none, people will walk across hot coals in order to go on a vacation with 150 of their coworkers and try to feel comfortable wearing a bathing suit with their coworkers at the pool, right? Like it's just this phenomenon that drives this amazing energy at the end of any quarter or end of year. And when you look at what that costs, that's like 5% of an enterprise seller's OTE. And now try and run a spiff that is 5% of an enterprise seller's OTE, and you won't even get them out of bed to worry about it, right? They won't even check the leaderboard you created. So I really think if we rely too much on comp plans to tell sellers what to do, or any variable and motivated person what to do, we're missing and we're totally letting our leadership off the hook. Our leadership needs to define the behaviors. They need to recognize the behaviors in real time. They need to talk about it, recognize it, put a spotlight on it so that others can see. Because, like I said, people will go to the ends of the earth to get a high five from the CEO at the pool at President's Club, and they won't get out of bed for anything less than 5 figures. And it's an amazing investment that you can make in the company. But if we rely on plans only without the right level of leadership in those roles, we're totally missing the boat, and we're really relying on a totally lagging indicator which is comp, which is 30, 60, 90 days later, to
Yeah.
tell somebody that they did what you wanted them to do as a company. And we can't let our leaders off the hook.
There's intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, right? And you
Yep.
need the extrinsic ones to be met, right? Like someone's joining as a seller, like they're hungry for that on target earnings. That's what they've committed to. They need to have a path to that. And I think that the biggest gap that most organizations think is they checkbox one. But yeah, the way you put it, of like, 5% spiff does nothing, but a presence club can drive some massive in engagement for sure.
Yeah, and I should clarify because it is a massive investment, and of course it drives behavior. But my point is more like leaders need to define that
Yeah,
behavior and recognize it in real time, and then it should be totally aligned with your comp plan so that people
exactly.
know
Yes.
exactly how to earn. But if you rely too much on the plan doc just to tell people what to do every day, I think you're missing 90% of the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm curious, Nabil, too. You've talked to a lot of different companies. Do you find that that's consistent across everyone you talk to, too, the recognition piece and the comp plan, or what do you find to be most effective from your experience?
100%. I mean, the best sellers, and I say this in the sense of like having interviewed a lot of actual sellers and seeing what they do, the best of the best really do treat it as like at the beginning of the year, they get their comp plan and then they're looking at their entire book of business. And they're actually more technical and analytical than almost anyone else because they're looking and like, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, like, how do I truly maximize this? So you think about like those are your 10Xers, right? They're almost on the top of the President's Club every year. So those like comp is a big part of the equation. But the recognition, I mean, like to your point, like being at President's Club, you're showing up. This is the recognition of everything that you've contributed to the business, and it's truly like you get that recognition from the senior leadership and it goes a far way. It doesn't need to be that extreme. There's an example where we've seen little things like calling out the run rate of like, okay, you've had a X dollar amount run rate every month, right? And then kind of having like a different like badge level of like
Yep.
50K, 100K, or 200K month. And all of a sudden, baking that into culturally, like the managers that brought it into their sales stand-ups of like, okay, who made it this year? Just want to recognize the people that are like 200K. It became like this cultural thing where like, oh my God, if you don't get at least 50K, it's like, what happened? And I think like that recognition goes so much further because that was just the dashboard element. It was not even there's no comp tied to how like the comp plan was actually separate, but just that building that recognition in, and I think it's a really big missed opportunity, I think, across the board. Well, this has been tremendously like I think interesting for me and tremendously like helpful in the sense of like it is about that connectivity across ops and comp. And I love that you're both here and it's clear in terms of like what you're doing at Boomi that is coming out on the day to day. I always ask this and so for audience today, I'm curious, what resources you found tremendously helpful in kind of helping you run your organizations better. And maybe Taylor, I'll start with you in terms of, whether it's a podcast, books, or other resources that you found have helped as you scaled in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll start off with a book that's been super helpful. It's not necessarily sales comp specific, but it is something that I think can be applied to leadership in your day to day. That's called The Slight Edge. So the whole overarching concept of this book is that little day-to-day tasks can really add up over time. So it's kind of like a compounded interest effect, right? So if you do little things before you know it, that really scales to the end. And I find that to be very true even in my day to day is the little things of organizing for 2 minutes your different files. At the end of the day, everything's organized and you're going really well. Sending those quick communications that you keep short but very consistent, that consistency will pay off a long run. I think the example I use in the book is the Major League Baseball player that adds an extra 5 hits in batting practice over the entire year, that really compounds to, an extra 100 hits or whatever it is. But those little moments you can do in your day to make it more effective can really, really add on. And then I think on the sales comp side, just, I mean, a lot of even just the Forma webinars and all the industry areas where you can talk to other people in this and not just be within your own company go a long way to see what other people are doing, what's effective, and what is everyone else experiencing out there. It really goes a long way.
We have one of our guiding principles is do the little things well because the big things take care of themselves. I'm curious, Tim, what a good resource has been for you in your career. I mean, I know you shared some books already, but anything else for
Yeah,
your audience?
no, there's two, and one is my go-to, and my father bought it for me a long time ago when I got my first leadership job, and it's Ken Blanchard's 1 Minute Manager on situational leadership. It's like a 30-minute read and has been an excellent kind of constant reminder in my mind around situational leadership styles and how to meet people where they are and provide the right level of coaching versus direction, which I think can diffuse any angst or concern when you're kind of espousing that challenger model that I mentioned earlier. So I love that one. And for a first-time manager, that's a must read. The other one, which is this is a little heady, but there's a book I recently read called Superabundance, which talks about how the human race has evolved over time and has never experienced a detrimental impact due to innovation, as opposed to actually a proliferation of wealth and value and benefit from innovation happening in the world around them. And it gives a dozen examples, but it's probably the one thing that I've read that allows me to sleep at night in the age of AI when it's like, oh my God, the robots are coming for us. I truly believe that, the human race has this ability to adapt and then compound benefits of whatever the latest innovation of the day is. So it's a really interesting read. And if nothing else, it makes you feel grateful that we aren't cavemen who are hunting, gathering, and trying to make a fire, right? This is a good time to be a human on Earth. And I think there's a lot of upside with all the innovation that's happening in the world right now, professionally and personally. So
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That abundance is only going to be opened up, and the fear mongering around like the world's going to go away. I mean, one, there's going to be more jobs that are open 100% because of opportunity. But two, every one of these innovation cycles has only opened up more niche industries that were just not like the ROI was not there. And
yeah.
if everyone can do what they're passionate and really good at, then like there's more more abundance for everyone in the world. So I couldn't agree more with that. I haven't read that book, but I couldn't agree more with that mentality.
What a hopeful and optimistic thought. I love
It's a great
it.
way to wrap up.
It's amazing.
I know that both Forma.ai and Boomi are heavily leaning into the world of AI. So I think this is it's certainly even seeing the more cutting edge use cases. I don't think we're automating the human being. I think we're just enabling us to do more. So I couldn't agree more. But I just want to echo again, thank you for coming on and sharing your experience. It's so valuable for the community and for everyone listening in to again take all these lessons, apply it to their business. And there's been a ton of great content tidbits and advice that's been shared. So thank you for both for joining and look forward to having another conversation in the future.
Sounds great.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you for
us.
having us. Yeah, thanks.
The Sales Competition Show is brought to you by Forma.ai, the sales performance management platform that fully integrates sales planning with rapid, scalable incentive compensation management. Our data platform brings together how you can plan and manage the entire lifecycle of territories, quotas, and incentives. With global customers like Autodesk, Stryker, and Hootsuite, we enable go-to-market teams to plan and deploy even the most complex SPM strategies at speed, taking you from idea to execution instantly. To learn more about Forma.ai, visit our website at Forma.ai. Hit the subscribe button and find more episodes of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.